Have you guys heard about the venture capitalist who called the FBI 12 times on her surrogate? Because it is probably the most insane and disturbing story I have read in quite a long time. To start right off the bat, the venture capitalist, her name is B.I., that's her last name. She's not supposed to be talking about this whatsoever. B met her husband when she was 36 and he was 28, and according to him, he said that the first thing that she said to him was, "I have my eggs frozen." So now B and this guy are married and they want to have children, and she decides to hire a surrogate, and not just one surrogate, but two surrogates, because she wants to have twins, but technically when you have twins as a surrogate, it's actually extremely more risky than to just have two surrogates, have them birth at around the same time, right? That will come into play a little bit later, but basically we're talking about the first surrogate, and her name is Smith. That's her last name. B contracts through a surrogate agency, and then she is matched with Smith. They meet, they decide that yes, we want Smith to be the surrogate for our only boy embryo. Now, a little bit of backstory into surrogacy. Surrogates are not usually informed of the health risks associated with being a surrogate, where certain medical complications in a normal pregnancy can have a 3% occurrence. In surrogates, that same exact complication has an 8% occurrence or higher. So it is extremely risky to be a surrogate. However, most surrogates are not actually informed of those medical risks. This is compounded by the fact that a lot of surrogate agencies require the surrogates to disclose their medical information to the potential parents, while the potential parents, who are the actual providers of the egg and the sperm, the fertilized egg, do not have to disclose any health information to the surrogate. This, again, will become important later on in this story. Smith gets implanted with this fertilized egg, and mind you, again, it is the only boy embryo of B. And everything goes very well, for the most part, for the first 7 months of this pregnancy. Aside from the fact that B is now posting medical information regarding this pregnancy from Smith to her own Facebook page. So it actually is a violation of their contract from the surrogacy agency. There's already multiple violations of the surrogacy contract in this situation already, leading up to the 7 months. But you're probably wondering what happened at 7 months. At around 7 months, Smith ends up going to the hospital because she fears that her water broke. The doctors tell her that her water did not break. There was also an instance in which Smith experienced a little bit of bleeding, and she told the doctors to tell the surrogacy agency to tell B that that was happening. However, the doctors never informed the surrogacy agency because they believed that it was insignificant. And somewhere around 10 days after this, the doctors informed Smith that the baby, Leon, was just actually not alive anymore, and that was due to a placental abruption, where the placenta just detached from the uterine wall. So the baby was not receiving oxygen anymore. Obviously, B is distraught to hear this news, but this is where it gets really bad. B then decides to go on a tirade against Smith, so much so that she calls the FBI 12 times. She hires a private investigator to follow Smith around, and she doxes Smith on all of her websites. This also includes sending a photo of the stillborn child to Smith's 7-year-old son. B sent a photo of a dead baby to a child. B then hires multiple psychics, all of which who tell her that Smith intentionally tried to kill this baby. And using that wisdom from these psychics, B then uses that information to not only get Smith fired from her jobs, but to also terminate her from her own health insurance claims. But here's where that second surrogate comes into play, right? Because we can't forget that B also had a second surrogate happening at about the same time because she wanted these two kids to be twins-ish. B describes that second surrogate is amazing, and she says the pregnancy went really well, except it didn't. That second surrogate literally had to have a hysterectomy because of this pregnancy. That second surrogate can no longer carry a child ever again. This was due to an issue with the placenta. Now, here's another fun fact about surrogacy. When you are a surrogate, yes, you yourself are carrying the baby, but that fertilized egg is from the mother and the father that are not you, right? That fertilized egg basically creates its own placenta. So the placenta is not your own DNA. It is from the mother and the father. So if there were any placental issues on the mother's side or the father's side, then that issue could potentially be an issue for the surrogate, which happened in the first surrogate's case and the second surrogate's case. In the first surrogate's case, she almost died, and now she's getting sued. And in the second surrogate's case, she lost her entire uterus. Both B and her husband's mothers had issues with their placenta when they were being born. Those issues were then passed on to the surrogates without the surrogate's knowledge. One surrogate, the second one, was at least able to keep the child and they had a healthy baby girl, but she lost her uterus in the process. And the first surrogate, she wasn't able to keep the baby due to an issue with the placenta. And she's now being sued and having the FBI called on her. Early last year, Smith, the first surrogate, filed a restraining order against B in which she can basically no longer dox her anymore. And B has been consistently violating that restraining order. And B has been quoted saying, mind you, she is a venture capitalist. She has an explicit amount of funds, right? Except apparently, according to B, she has exhausted all of those funds just paying for lawyers to try and win her case against Smith. In fact, 2 of those lawyers have actually not been paid, to the total of about $200,000 each. So even though she spent about $750,000 in legal funds, only $350,000 of those have actually been paid to the lawyers, and $400,000 that has not been paid to the lawyers. When those lawyers asked B if they were going to get paid, B said, I can't pay you because I need to make sure that I can pay for another lawyer. And if none of this convinced you that B is going absolutely out of her mind to defend this case, let me tell you about the fact that their healthy girl daughter has been alive for less than a year, and they've already gone through 6 babysitters. This is already getting so long, so I'm just going to cap it here. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for even listening, because this is the craziest thing that I've heard in so long, and I need to talk about it with somebody. But if you really want the full picture, I would be happy to give the full explanation, but it would take multiple parts. However, if you really just want to read it for yourself, it's on wired.com. If you search Cindy B. Surrogate, it's going to be the first thing that pops up, okay? Thank you.
First of all, I did not know when you became a surrogate that you could potentially get the problems of said people that you're surrogating for. I didn't know that. Why didn't no one tell us that? Like, what? So if these people know they had issues with the semen or keeping a baby at all inside of their wombs, and then went to get help and put someone else at risk without telling them the risk, isn't that nuts? Can't you get sued for that? I feel like the person that was a surrogate should be suing B because she lost her placenta. The other lady had a hysterectomy. Oh my gosh. Why didn't they teach anybody this in school? Like, this is nuts. Childbirth is hard. That's why I don't have kids yet. It's on the list, but... And now you're telling me that this crazy lady... You could also be stuck with a crazy lady if you were to, like, be a surrogate. Because I always thought surrogacy was, like, a beautiful thing. Like, if I didn't want to have my own kids, I would help someone else to have their kids. But now I'm thinking differently, because... you could get the problems of the birth parents. Especially what if your blood and their blood isn't mixed, but you're trying to mix it inside? Too complicated, too rich for me. No, thank you. What do you guys think about this video? Put it in the comment section below.